All right, you guys can all see my screen, I assume. So today is Wednesday, October 6th. Today we're going to be covering Python, so kind of just getting introduction to Python. I know some of you guys may have already worked with Python before. For some others, you guys maybe have never seen Python code or even worked with it. Totally fine. I've said this, I think, many times. I'm sure you guys have heard me say it, a few of you have heard me say this. Don't worry, don't kind of freak out and say, oh no, I got to learn a whole nother language. It's not quite that extreme. So if you know one programming language, it's pretty easy to adopt another programming language. Again, Python's going to have if statements, for loops, functions, everything that you're familiar with in JavaScript. The same concepts apply for Python. The biggest challenge for most people is just going to be understanding the syntax difference, and especially when you're coding in both JavaScript and Python, kind of just make that context switch or that mental switch of, all right, I'm writing in Python, I need to do a print statement instead of a console log. I always screw those up when I'm kind of writing in both at the same time. Yeah, you'll get plenty of practice with writing in Python. So that's today's material. So hopefully you guys look forward to that. But for now, we're going to do our coding challenge. So one thing I want to mention, so you can find coding challenges, obviously, as we mentioned, if you go to the day, so yesterday was the 5th, you scroll all the way down, you guys had a handful of challenges, so Roman numerals, factorial, Fibonacci, linear search. Hopefully you guys had fun with those. Another place you can find challenges, I know some of you guys have already discovered this. If you go to the main curriculum page, at the very bottom, there's an assignments.md. This kind of lists all the assignments for every single day. So you kind of just get a quick shortcut. So if you're like, oh, what's the assignments for Friday the 8th, you can kind of find all of them there. And yes, you do have a bunch of assignments this Friday. So Roman numerals is the challenge we're going to review today. So I'm going to bring that up here. And I kind of want to hear from you guys. So let's see, who do I see on my screen? Let's go with Tanya. I want to start doing this challenge. What's the first step I need to do from this GitHub page? So I'm on Papa Platoon, Algo, Roman numerals.
The first thing you have to do is fork.
Yep, you got it.
Yeah,
so I'm going to
the assignment to yours.
Yep, you got it. Correct. Thanks. Yeah, so Tanya is correct. We want to fork it over. So again, you can clone this code down. I'm on Papa Platoon. You can clone this, like copy this URL and clone it down and solve the problem. The only issue you're going to have is you're not going to be able to commit because this is our repository or our organization. So you do not have write permissions to this location, so you won't be able to save anything. So yeah, as Tanya said, we want to fork this over. I'm going to fork this over to my personal GitHub. So I'm going to click my GitHub name. That should take 5 seconds, maybe 4 seconds. All right, it's going. All right, so I forked this over. So notice this is in Encore CP. I'll go Roman numerals. All right, cool. Thanks, Tanya. Let's call on Scott. All right, so we forked this over to my personal repository. What's my next step for proceeding with tackling this challenge?
Sorry, trying to unmute. Okay, so inside VS Code, at this point, I would let's see. So you forked it, and then I would go ahead and go to code to copy the link.
Okay. Oh, right. Yep. You want to copy the link? Great. Yep. All right. We copied the link. What do you want to do with that link now?
Okay. And then inside VS Code.
Okay. I think I know where you're going. I'm going to do it on my terminal here, but it's all the same.
Right, and then git clone, or I'm sorry, you'd want to make sure that you're in the correct directory.
Yep. So yeah, I have my directory as Papa challenges. So that is where I'm going to dump all my challenges. Yep. And then I know you mentioned git clone, right?
Correct. And then paste that.
Oops. Looks like I didn't copy it correctly. Let me copy that again. There we go. All right, so I need to set up my password here. Okay, so we cloned that down. If you configured everything correctly, you should not have to type your password in every time. I think I missed a step during my installations, but yeah, so we cloned it down. So now we copied down the code. Great, thanks so much, Scott. Let's see, Seth, what's the next thing I want to do now?
So you're going to want to open this up in VS Code so you can
Yep.
actually use it. So if you can give me a LS.
Let's do an ls.
So let's go. You could probably just go straight in and open up the folder.
Okay. How do I
so-
open up a folder in the command line?
So in the command line, so you'll do code,
Code.
and then you can go algo Roman numerals.
Okay.
And then this is going to open it up in VS Code.
Gotcha. All right, so there's my VS Code. All right, cool. We have the algo Roman numerals folder. All right, great. Thanks, guys, for helping me get started here. All right, so we're going to be doing this in JavaScript. So you can kind of ignore the Python folder for now. Let's ignore this. All right, so let's take a look at the README. So part 0 is pseudocoding. So hopefully you guys are familiar with the idea of pseudocoding. We'll go through that, kind of just like writing a game plan before we even start coding. And this is usually, very beneficial because when you don't want to just kind of start coding right away because you can kind of like get lost and go down the wrong path. You want to have that mental image of like, all right, I need to do step 1, step 2, and that can kind of help formulate your code blocks. So let's take a look at this. It looks like we have some pseudocode kind of provided for us this time, so that's kind of great. We can start with that. Looks like we also have some typos here. We'll fix those later. Okay, so let's talk about Roman numerals. So Roman numerals are just another way to represent numbers. Hopefully you guys have seen this before. We use I instead of ones. With writing out 3, we'd write 3 I's represents 3. And then, we have different, increments. So instead of having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we have I's, we have B's, X's, which represent 1, 5, 10, and so forth. All right, so our job today is asking us to, part 1, lazy Roman numerals, converts a decimal number into format that I've highlighted here. And so lazy Roman numerals is basically stating you don't have to kind of convert those special numbers, right? Like if you remember 4 in Roman numerals is actually IV. So you put the I before the next increment. But let's just kind of ignore that for now. So lazy Roman numerals, let's take the pseudocode since it was written for us. And I'm going to drop that into my coding window here. Just a couple things to mention. Oops, sorry, I want to count that out. There we go. So we have 2 files here. We have a spec file, and then we have the Roman numerals JS file. The spec file is basically our testing file. And I believe Kana asked about how do we actually, I think it was Kana in the chat, asked about how do we actually run this test file like in a proper way. We are going to get to that tomorrow. Tomorrow's topic is test-driven development. So we're going to be talking about how to actually use some testing tools to make our lives a little easier, a little more robust when it comes to testing. But for now, our tests are simply console logs, and we're just kind of checking what our function outputs versus what we expect it to be output. So 1, we expect I, 3, we expect I. It looks like this is not the lazy version, so I'm actually going to switch this over to lazy Roman numerals, which is going to be 4 I's for 4. I'm going to add a couple more test cases. I don't think this is not exhaustive enough. I want to use different increments. So let's kind of add a few test cases before we even start coding, just so we know that once we code something, we can verify if that successfully gives us what we want. So let's go. I'm going to pick some random numbers. Go with 18. 18 should be in lazy Roman numerals X V I, and I assume that's the same in non. All right, let's go with someone shout out a number.
42.
42, an excellent number. That should be XX XII. Let's go a little larger. Someone get a nice large number for me.
998.
998. Oops. Not what I want. All right, this one I will need to kind of reference because I don't know my Roman numerals. So 900 would be D C C C C. All right, it's going to take a little bit for me. What is it? D C C C, and then what's
VII.
Sorry, I got to keep looking this up. L is what I need. So L, and then X, 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 X. It's quite a number you came up here with. I think those are correct. In the lazy form, we might need to check the non-lazy form. So let me do a quick Google just to verify that. I don't want to have bad test cases. So lazy Roman and 998. I wonder if that has. So that's the non-lazy way. All right, we'll just assume this is correct for the lazy way. I'm not sure if there's a good way to check it, but 500, 450. Okay, I think that's correct. If anyone thinks that's wrong, you can definitely correct it. Okay, so I got some additional test cases. So let's actually get to coding. One thing I think good time to talk about it is what's going on between these two files. We have Roman numerals and Roman numerals spec. So if you notice the top line here, we're actually importing items from Roman numerals into this file. So we have two files. The spec file is dependent on the Roman numerals file. And we are basically getting this object that has some function or some item on it. So this to Roman is coming from this file. Now the question is, how does this object know that this to Roman exists? That's the whole kind of magic of using exports. So exports is an object that you can add items to. So in this case, we're declaring to Roman. We're creating a to Roman member on exports, and that will allow to Roman to be used over here in this file. Right, so if we created like another function, like let's say I created a function, my new function, and let's say it takes in whatever, a number also. Right, so I created a function. This function can be used anywhere in this file, but it's not been exported. It's only internal to this file. So if I wanted to use it in my spec file, if I try to do something like rn.myNewFunction, it's not going to know what this is because it's not been exported from the previous file. So if I try to use it, let me try running my spec file and see what happens. So I'm going to bring up my terminal. Again, that shortcut is Control tilde. And let's go with, so I'm going to cd into my JS folder and run node Roman spec. All right, so I'm going to run this. Notice what the error message says. So again, reading error messages is a skill that developers definitely need to refine. So looking at this, it says it's pointing to that line. Unsurprisingly, it's saying my new function is not, my new function is not a function. So I know it's a function that exists, but this file does not know that that function exists. So one way to tell it that it's actually something I want to use is I could create exports.myNewFunction and assign that to a function that I create here. All right, so if I do it this way, my spec file should now know that that is something it can grab from my Roman numerals file. All right, so I run this again. All right, so notice I was able to run. Obviously, we failed all of our test cases because we have no logic for to Roman, but we were able to run our file because this function now is visible to this file. All right, I know there were previous questions about that. I think someone raised their hand.
Yeah, so do you have to do it in the declaration, or can you do the declaration of the function and then later do the export.function and it'll also send it later?
Great question. You do not have to do it in the declaration. There are a couple ways to do it. So one other way, if I just create functions like normal, so let's change this to be more common. So we just create a function. Let's keep this function around that does nothing really for me. All right, so function. All right, so we have two functions. Again, these are only visible right now to this file. So I could use to Roman my new function anywhere in this file if I want to. However, my spec file, again, if I run this again, just to show you it's not going to work, notice we get an error saying, hey, I have no idea what to Roman is. The other way to do it, or at least one other way, is you can set up an object. So let's say my exports. You can name this whatever you want. So I'm going to say let my exports and create an object. So I'm going to add these items to it. So I'll add to Roman and my new function. All right, and then at the bottom of your file, you need to add a line saying exports default or was it defaults? My exports. I might need to look up my syntax here, but basically we're exporting this object out of this file. So hopefully I did that correctly. Nope. Exports. All right, let's do a quick Google.
So what's a period?
Let's go to Stack Overflow. So export defaults. String. Let's try it the other way. And so instead of creating my objects, let's drop that in here. Sorry. So there's a couple ways to do this. I might get a warning if I do it this way. Exports. Let's. I wonder if it's.
Does it matter that you don't have semicolons at the end of them?
Great question. So semicolons are optional for the most part. So in JavaScript, semicolons are the default delimiter. However, JavaScript will automatically insert semicolons for you if you don't add them in. So that's a great thought. But in this case, I do not need to have them. Let's see.
Is it looked at as bad practice at all to not have semicolons at all?
I wouldn't say that's bad practice. I came from C++ where you need semicolons, but I wouldn't say it's bad practice. I usually don't add semicolons when I'm writing JavaScript. But
Okay, good.
So just an FYI, it depends on what organization you go to and their coding standards. More likely than not, you're going to be working in a legacy JavaScript code base, so they're more likely going to have semicolons.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
I have a quick question.
go for it.
So for like debugging purposes, if I wanted to like check my code, the function on the Roman numerals.js file, would I have to remove that export before I did a console log?
Sorry, so remove what export? So the ones that we had before?
Yeah, well, if I just wanted to, like the way it's originally set up is export dot to Roman.
Yep.
So when I tried to run it in the console log, the function, it said that to Roman is not defined. So would I have to remove that export?
Yes, so you need to have the exports in there. So this exports is basically an object that's containing a member called toRoman, which is assigned to a function. So if you want to call this function in this file, you need to call it by doing toRoman. So now you could pass in a number like 42, and let's just say we want to return 40, return the number right now. So if we did it this way, let me run my Roman numerals file.js. So if I ran this, that should run it. Obviously, I'm not console logging. This is what we talked about between REPL and not REPL. So I want to log the result, and I should get 42 out because I'm just returning the number here. But yeah, to call that function, you need to have exports.toRoman.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So apologies about that detour about exporting. There's a way to kind of export multiple functions at the very end. I'm not sure if it's because the syntax up here, but we'll kind of come back to that at a later time. All right, so let me run this. We should get 42 out. There we go. Were there any other questions about exports or any thoughts or things I confused you about? Again, on the high level, just kind of understand that if you create something in one file, if you want it visible outside of that file, you need to export it. By default, there's this exports object. It's not something you had to create. It automatically exists, that and it allows you to add members to it. So in this case, we're adding toRoman. We could add, as many things we want to the exports that will automatically kind of be made visible to anything that's trying to import something from that file.
You can also export the function out, like just write the function normally and then export everything at the very bottom. And there is an instructor solution to some of the challenges from yesterday that kind of show you how to do that.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was trying to do here, but I think my syntax is off there. But yes, there's a way to kind of go for it.
No, I can walk you through it.
Oh, sure. Okay, so we have function, that typos toRoman. And then we need to export at the bottom. right?
I think it's exports or module dot exports
Gotcha.
equals to Roman.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
And you can include that as an object too. That should still work. But yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks so much. So let's give that a run.
But then I think when you have to import it, well, line 16 is, and then the way you import it there, it might be a little different.
Okay, cool. So let's try running that. Okay, cool. So that
okay,
does
cool.
work also. So thanks, Tom. So yeah, again, this object exists, so you can kind of add items to it after the fact. So if I had 12 functions here, I can just create them up here and then export them in this manner. So cool. Okay, I'm gonna kind of leave it like that just to see something different. But okay, so let's get to our actual challenge. So everything seems to be working, but we don't have anything kind of coded up here. So let's take a look at our pseudocode. So again, this was written out for us. I'd recommend for any challenge you're attempting, kind of just write some pseudocode out. And what we mean by pseudocode is, again, just writing some comments or just writing on a piece of paper saying, hey, this is how I'm going to attack this challenge, and kind of break it down into smaller pieces. It's always good to kind of have that take a larger problem and make it a little more bite-sized as you go through it. So first thing, you want to write a method to Roman. Roman takes an input number. That's done. Create an output string, set it to empty strings. All right, so we know we need to return something. It's going to be a string. So I'm going to do let Roman value equals empty string, I like double quotes, and then eventually you're going to return that Roman value. All right, so we can see our function slowly coming together here. All right, so return Roman value. Next, step 3, create a Roman numeral to Arabic map that includes Roman numerals as keys, Arabic numbers as values. All right, so again, there's a few ways you can go about this, but we're going to need some data structure or some way to kind of take in a decimal number and convert it to a Roman equivalent. All right, so to accomplish that, I'm going to let's create a variable, const conversion data. I don't know if that's a good name for it. So I'm going to create a list, and this list is going to have a few items in it. The reason I'm going with an array in JavaScript is because arrays are ordered, so I can kind of control the ordering here. So if I let's do decimal value. So what was our largest increment? I think 1,000 is the one we gotta worry about. So I can do 1,000. And let's say the Roman value of that is as a string. All right, so we're just going to create our conversion data for basically mapping out these values. The reason I'm putting this in an object is so I can have a descriptive name for the values. I know I saw someone else's code, I think yesterday. There are multiple ways to attack this. So another way you could do this would be const, let's just say some data. I saw someone's solution that had an array of arrays, so something like 1,000 and m, and you go to the next increment, which I think is 500, set d, and so forth. So this is essentially the same thing. You're just basically grouping data, so the m and the 1,000 are kind of paired together in another array. This totally works fine also. The reason I prefer objects is because they kind of give you a little more description. We kind of see, let's actually see them both in action just for fun. So let's say conversion array. All right, so they're both arrays, but the internal data is going to be either an array or an object. So let's kind of quickly code this up and see what our next step will be. So I think we had 7 increments, maybe 500. C 100 was C. What was next? 50 was L. 10, 5, and 1. All All right, any questions so far? I want to make sure I haven't lost anybody. All right, cool. So that's our conversion objects. Let's say I'll do the same thing here. Do that quickly. And so again, this is going back to the idea of there's multiple ways to solve the same problem. So there's not always one right way or anything like that. So 50, 100. All right, you guys with me so far? And okay, cool. So I'm going to use my conversion objects, and let's see. So let's kind of think about how do we need to break this problem down. Let's see what step 4 is. So step 4, we want to iterate over our conversion data or our map and keep track of Roman numeral and Arabic. So if I'm kind of just thinking about this conceptually, we're going to be kind of building this number up digit by digit, or I guess numeral by numeral. So we're going to need to kind of do that iteratively. So I'll do, I think a for loop would make sense for me. So I'm going to do for, let's do let I equal 0 and I less than . Okay, so we're basically going to iterate through this entire array. So again, to highlight, this is an array, and each item inside the array is an object. So we're going to go through the first object, then the second one, then the third one. One question, I think I might have kind of automatically skipped over this in my thought process. There's a reason why I started with the largest increment, and that's because when we're trying to convert, we always want to start with the largest increment. So that's why I put that first, instead of having the 1 be my first item. All right, so let's see. So we have our original number, which is num, that's passed in, and we want to start breaking that down. So like, if we had, let's have a test case. So let's call our function to Roman. Again, we don't have to put the exports in there because we took that out of our definition here, or declaration. So to Roman, let's do 42. Let's keep it simple for now. So when I'm trying to break down 42, what's essentially going to happen is we're going to get to 1,000 and realize, that 1,000 does not go into that any number of times. So we skip that. 500, 150, none of those really apply for the 42 case. But then we get down to 10. And so when we get down to 10 in this for loop, we want to know how many times 10 goes into our number. And then we also want to take the remainder and keep that, for future processing. So what I'm going to do here is basically, let's say, let's increments equal, and then I'm going to find out how many times my increment goes into the number. So let's say, so there's a few ways to do this. You could, the best way, or maybe not the best way, but one way is to use the for function. So this is something coming from the math library. It gives you access to a lot of mathematical functions. Floor, if you guys are familiar with it, basically round down to the nearest integer. So the reason I'm doing this, because if I did num divided by my increment, which is going to be conversion objects at index I, and then that's going to be my decimal. Right? Does everyone kind of understand how I'm kind of picking out the data that I want? So square brackets I is going to tell me what index I'm looking at. So when I equals 0, I'm going to be looking at this object right here. When I have that object, I want to get this number out of it. So decimal is the key, and 1,000 will be the value I get out of it. So if I do dot decimal, I'll get 1,000 back. Everyone kind of clear on that? I'll take the silence as yes. Just to kind of highlight, if we're using the array approach, totally valid, it's going to work. I think it's a little less clear. So again, I prefer objects, and when we get into classes, we'll talk about why classes are kind of better. But if we did conversion arrays, again, this will totally work, 100% correct solution. But when we get to kind of writing our code, instead of having this dot decimal, we're probably going to have square bracket 0. Now this will access the same data. So we'll get, we'll look at our first index. If our I value is 0, we'll be looking at this array pair. When we do index 0, we'll get this 1000 out. The reason I don't favor this is just because reading this code, it's a little less clear to me what this value actually represents, right? I'm looking at an index I, index 0, well then, okay, cool. I gotta go back up to, conversion arrays and then check, okay, well, index 0 here is gonna be 1000. So it's a little less clear for me, but again, you're the developer, you get to kind of control what you think is best for your code. So in this case, I'm gonna switch back to conversion objects. I'm gonna get rid of conversion arrays just so we have less confusion. Data. Data and okay, cool. So we have the increment that we're trying to see how many times it goes in the number. Again, the reason I can't simply do a division is because this is going to give me a floating point number. So if you remember, Tom talked about different types of numeric values you can have. When I divide 42 by, like, let's say 1000, I'm going to get some decimal number. If I divide 42 by 10, I get 4.2 back. But that's not actually what I'm interested in. I'm interested in just how many times 10 goes into my number that I have here. So I'm going to take that results and I'm going to floor it. I'm going to do math floor. And that's, again, a pre-built-in function. Again, this is something that might be frustrating for new developers in that you're probably asking, or might be asking, hey, how do you know about this function? Like, how do you just kind of pull out of thin air? And that's going to be reading documentation. So, you know, if you're not familiar with it, you can do a quick Google, how to round number JavaScript. All right, so there's math.round. Let's say round down. And then, you know, you have a few options. So you could use round for WS School. So this, again, can give you kind of a quick tutorial and kind of tell you how it works. But again, some of it is just, yeah, the more you use the language, the more familiar you'll be with built-in functions. Was there a question?
Yeah, I'm just curious. I don't remember. Does JavaScript have the double / for the divide? Would that do the same thing as the math floor?
Great question. JavaScript does not have that, but Python does. So stay tuned for Python. Okay, cool. So I'm going to math.floor, so that's going to round down, and that's going to tell me how many times that particular value goes into my existing number. All right, so let's kind of do this incrementally. So I'm going to just print out increments, and let's just see what values we get. But the next thing we need to do is, once we do that, you know, kind of division, we also want to take the remainder. Does anyone remember how I could just get a remainder from like a division operation?
Modulus.
What was that, Michael?
Modulus.
Yep. Yeah. So in this case, I'm just going to kind of reassign back to my original number. I could create a new variable, but it's just going to kind of create extra data that I don't need. So I'm going to assign back to num. I'm going to do num mod my decimal value.
And uncur is the print of Python thing? Okay.
Thank you. See, I'm already making mistakes already. So yeah, console log is what I want to do. So yeah, I just want to print out, see how many increments that results in. And just to make this a little clear, I'm going to say decimal value and grab that up there. Okay, so we have that, And let me just print out, or console log, the new num value. So we say new num. All right, I just want to see what my algorithm's doing. It's always kind of good to kind of incrementally check what you have coded up and make sure that it does what you expect it to do. Because I don't want to just code this up entirely and then kind of try to test it that way. Because if there's multiple bugs in there, it's going to be harder to find what I screwed up. So it's always good to kind of just test in between. So calculated. All right, so let's give this a run. Not sure if I have any mistakes. Maybe I messed something up, but let's see what this output. So I would expect, and again, it's always good to have your expectations and have that validated by what you get output. So in this case, I would expect as we go through this loop, we'll start with 1000. And in this case, we're just checking 42. So we'll start with 1000. I would expect that 1000 goes into 42 exactly 0 times. So I would expect my calculated increments to be 0, and let's actually print out the increment 2, or the decimal value. So do a console log. And decimal value. Okay, cool. So for 1,000, I expect a 0 for the increments, and my number should be unchanged because I have 42. I'm going to mod that by 1,000, and the remainder should be 42. All right, so you see 0 for 1,000, 0 for 500, 0, 0. So you see 4 zeros for the first 4 iterations of my loop. When we get down to 10, I'd expect my calculated increments to be a value of 4 because 10 goes into 42 4 times, and then the remainder should be 2. So I would assume new num should be 2 at that point. All right, so let's give this a try, and then that's going to continue. We're going to get down to 5. Our new value that we're investigating is going to be 2 because that's a remainder from the previous operation. So 5 will not really apply. We'll get a 0 from that, 0 for the increments. We get down to 1. 1 goes into 2 times. So that's kind of what I expect. Let's actually run this and see what my algorithm kind of does here. So I'm going to do node Roman numerals.js. Okay, so let's see what we got in our output. Let me make this bigger. All right, so notice, get to see some descriptive items. So our decimal value for the first iteration is going to be 1,000. The reason is because that's my first entry in my array. Notice we get 0, that looks correct. Our new num, as in when we divide 42 by our current decimal value, that's a remainder. So yeah, 42 mod 1,000 will be a leftover of 42. Same thing with 500, same thing with 100. Notice we get these zeros. Then we get down to 10. We get a 4 value here, which is what I expected, right? 42 divided by 10, ignoring the remainder, is going to be 4. And then notice that our new num is now going to be 2. So our original number was 42. When we finally get an increment that goes into it, we only take the leftovers. So leftover in this case is 2. Right? Any questions out there? Anyone kind of curious about anything I wrote, or did I lose anyone anywhere? Okay, I assume you guys are following along then. All right, cool. So I'm going to kind of comment out these console logs that are kind of cluttering up my output. It looks like I get the values I expect, so we can kind of proceed from here. So we have this this data that lets us take a decimal value and then convert it to Roman. So how can we go about this? So we know how many times we get an increment. The question is, how do we actually convert that to a Roman numeral? So here I could write maybe a for loop. So I'm going to do for let j equals 0. And we're going to count up to the number of increments that we have. So I do j less than increments. Again, since we're starting at 0, we want to do less than. We don't want to count up 2 increments. And then we'll do j++. And all I'm going to do with this is basically append to our Roman value. So that's something we created at the very top. We're not using it right now. But I'm just going to use this for loop to kind of, as many increments we have, I'm going to keep appending my Roman numeral to my output. All right, so I'm going to go Roman value plus equals. Is everyone kind of clear on what plus equals does? It's a shortcut, so I'll do it both ways. So you could do Roman value plus, I want to do conversion data, index I. In this case, we want to do the Roman part of it. We don't want to use decimal. That's, that's just digit. We want to get the string value or the Roman value out of it. So basically, we're just going to kind of add to our existing Roman value that we have and just kind of append another numeral to it. So this is one way you can write it, kind of a shortcut way, again, just to save inch bit of time. You do plus equals and do it this way. Both of these lines are doing the exact same thing. This plus equals basically says take the value on the left side and kind of append or add on whatever we're putting on the right side of that operation. All right, so you might see this. I usually prefer using that just because it's a little quicker, but don't get confused or don't kind of freak out like, oh, what's going on here? All right, so I'm going to go with that syntax. Hopefully everyone is cool with that. Okay, so we're just going to keep adding these numerals that many times. So again, for the case of 42, when we get down to 10, we're going to have 4 increments. So we're going to append 4 X's onto our string, and the same thing should happen. So let's write some comments. Always good to comment our codes. Let's say append, say, all right, what else? We should just get rid of these console logs. I don't think I'll need them. I'm just taking a moment to count my code. Always good practice to count your code. So this one goes into current num, and then finally want to update. Okay, cool. So we commented our code, and I think we got a good algorithm going here. So again, this is going to build up our string, and then finally want to return our Roman values. So I think that looks good to me, but always good to verify it by running your code. All right, cool. So notice we got XX, maybe I need to blow that up a little bit. XX, XII. So that looks like what I expected, right? 42. Let's try a bigger number. So I think let's go with 765. Let's just kind of run that. I'm not going to kind of pre-validate that. So we got a D, which is 500. We got 2 C's, which is 200. So that's puts us at 700. We get a 50. Another 10, so that's another 60 on there. So we get 760 and then a 5. So for now, it looks like it's running well. I feel like we have a good algorithm here. So at this point, I'm ready to run my test file. So again, right now, our test file is simply doing some console logs. Again, we're going to get into testing material tomorrow, but let's kind of just run our spec file. So our spec file is going to run our 2 Roman and compare it against what we expect. So to do that, I'm going to node Roman numerals spec, and then run that. All right, that makes me feel a little good. I got 6 trues, so it looks like all my test cases passed. Obviously, if I want to add a few more, like maybe edge cases, like let's add just a whole number, like a exact increment. So let's just do 500. So that should be simply a D. Let's do, I don't know, 10, nothing too exciting there. Make sure that our algorithm kind of handles some special cases. All right, cool. So I still got some trues. So it looks like everything seems to be working. Again, the more test cases you add, the better confidence you can have in your solution. But at this point, I think this is a pretty good solution for lazy Roman numerals. What questions do you guys have about anything about our solution, or just anything you want to ask?
Is it outputting that Roman, the actual Roman numeral there, because in your original code it has 2 Romans, so even though you're running the speci file, it's actually running the Roman file inside of it and then console logging? Is that how it's working?
Yep, you got it. So notice, yep, Michael got that correct. Notice I had an output here. That's because my my Roman numerals file had an output in there. Yep, so I got rid of that console log, so hopefully that should take that away. Yep, there's just truths. All right, cool. So I think that accomplishes everything for lazy Roman numerals. So that's part 1. Again, always good to incrementally commit. So, I could kind of proceed to do part 2, but I kind of want to save what I've accomplished right now. So I'm going to do a git add. So, or git add, and I'm just going to add everything here. So now I've added that, and I want to kind of commit that to my staging area. So if I do git commit -m, I'll say completed part 1. Right. So always good to have descriptive messages. You don't want to say like updated or just done. That doesn't really, if you're looking back at the history, you're not going to really be able to pick off what commit is actually doing. So in this case, I could do a git push, but right now I'm just going to kind of leave that in the staging area. I'll do one final git push when I complete my assignment here. All right, so let's move on to the next part of this, which is modern Roman numerals. These are the Roman numerals we're more familiar with, where we, for value of 4, you'll see IV instead of III. You'll see IX for 9. So basically, I believe the rule is for Roman numerals, you can't have 4 consecutive identical numerals. So you can't have III because that's 4 of the same numerals together. So at that point, you need to convert it to this, right? So in modern Roman numerals, you'll never see 4 consecutive numerals of the same type. Okay, so let's kind of think about this. Now, given what I said, there's probably some complicated way to approach this where you're like, all right, I can investigate if I have 4 identical numerals and then kind of convert it. That's not generally the best approach to this. It's possible, I think, but let's kind of just think about it in terms of our increments that we have here. So we have some additional increments. So for 4, we have a new increment that's IV. So I'm going to add that here. So we just have another bucket size. So we go down from 5 to 4. And that 4, if we have something that's 4, this bucket will capture it. So I'm going to do that for the rest of these. And actually, I'm going to create a new data structure just to kind of keep these separate. So I'm going to do const conversion. Can somebody tell me what const does again?
That's a constant, something that's not going to change.
Yep. And yeah, so you want to use, you don't have to use const, like these can be lets, they can be vars, but we're going to shun vars, so since they don't exist. But since I don't expect this data to ever change, this const kind of tells anyone reading my code that, okay, this is kind of static data, constant data. It's not expected to change. That's not the whole story. I don't want to get too complicated here, but I can actually modify these values. But I'm going to kind of skirt over that point. So let me copy that, and I'm going to add on to this. So start with the very top. So our next increment, in terms of the next numeral that we're going to have, is going to be dm. So basically, you take the larger numeral and you prepend it with the next increment. So in this case, you're subtracting 100 from 1,000. Sorry, was there a comment there?
I think it's XM.
Oh, XM.
Sorry, CM.
CM.
Way off.
Thank you. You're right. Yeah, so we want to subtract 100 from 1,000. So yeah, thank you there. DM would effectively be 500. We take 1,000, subtract 5. Thanks for catching that. CM, so that's cool. Same thing for 400. We want to subtract, we're going to take 500, which is D, and subtract 100. So we'll do CD. And then same thing here, go down to 90. So we have C, we want to take away 10, so that's going to be XC. And a couple more to do here. So 40, 9, and 4. 40 would be XL, subtracting 10 from 50. We have 9 here. So we want to subtract 1 from 10, so that's going to be IX. And finally, we have 4. So it's going to be subtracting 1, or yeah, subtracting 1 from 5. All right. So basically, we just have more buckets that we need to deal with, but otherwise, our algorithm should be essentially the same. Right. So again, this, I wouldn't say this is necessarily like a trick, but hopefully you didn't go down that path. Okay, well, modern Roman numerals, you need kind of like reverse numerals when you get to the next, like the increment right before the next one or something. I'm curious if anyone went down that line. Again, I'm sure it's possible, but your code's gonna be a lot more involved, I think, to kind of accomplish that. So this way I have my data modern and I can use that here. So let's say I change this to modern. And modern.
That's how I initially did it, by the way. And it's not too bad with a few regexes. And then Sean blew my mind yesterday when he said, well, why don't we just do what we just did here? I was, what? Oh my gosh.
Yep, pair programming, there you go. I mean, different ways to think about the same thing, right? Okay, so I switched my data over to data modern. So that contains the new values. And then let's update our test specs. I'm actually gonna comment these out and say these are our lazy Roman tests. And a lot of these will be the same, but not all. So if I copy this and say modern Roman tests. Okay, let me comment that. So do you guys remember the shortcut? I know Tom mentioned yesterday, you can do Command /. You can kind of toggle between commenting a block of code and uncommenting it. All right, so let's kind of go through this. So I think I, or 1 for I should be the same, 3 should be 3 I's, but 4 will be different. So in this case, I need to convert that to this. So IV is equal to 4. 18, I think that's the same. Let's add a 19 here. That's gonna be a little different. So 19 should be XIX, I believe, right? Because you have 10 and then a 9 right there. 42, I think that's the same. 998, I am not going to do that myself. I think I Googled that earlier, but Roman. Okay, so I'm going to trust Google is not lying to me, so I'll just take that and copy that over. These will be the same. Let's get a couple more numbers in here. So who's got a favorite number out there? Something larger than 1,000. Give me a number.
4,096.
Is that 4,096? Okay. Google that too. 4,006. That's what we have here. That's kind of cool. Almost a palindrome there.
That's not going to work for you because you can't do the macron above the IV.
Yeah, I think it changes above 3,000, so you need to keep them under 3, right?
Gotcha. All right. You're right. Let's pull that down to 2,096. Sorry for yeah, our largest increment is 1,000, so thanks for catching that. Okay, let's do one more number.
510.
510. Excellent. All right, so 510. All right, so we have some test cases here. I said most of them are identical to our lazy Roman numerals, but there's a few that will be different. So this would be DX, I believe. Yeah, okay. So let's give that a trust. Let's give that a run. So I'll do node Roman spec. Okay, ooh, I get a false in there. That's not what I want to see. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Looks like my 6th test case. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
It's 42.
I got a little too quick there. So 40 is going to be XL. Yep. Super Bowl number. So that was my bad. All right, there we go. So proper test cases, obviously you want to verify that your expected values are actually accurate. As we talk tomorrow about test-driven development, again, you want to write your test cases first. You don't want your code to tell you what the expected value should be. So it's just a methodology with test-driven development. But all right, cool. That was my mistake, but easy enough to fix. All right, cool. So we're passing all of our test cases. Pretty confident we have a good solution here. So that's cool. I think that I'm ready to add these changes. So clear, so git add. Again, this is going to add the new changes. Git commits. We'll say completed part 2. All right, and then, all right, 2 files changed. I changed the spec file and my original file. We'll do a, okay, so I committed that. Cool. I'm going to do one additional thing here, just for the sake of doing it. I think all right. Yeah, so one thing right now, my code can't really do both lazy and modern Roman numerals, but I kind of want to adapt my code so that I can kind of run both test cases and still kind of accomplish or test both and kind of run both. So this is where I'm actually going to modify some of our functions here. So we have this toRoman that takes in a number. There's a couple ways I could go about this. I could create a whole new function. Let's say function toRoman modern takes in the number. We'll do the same exact thing that I'm doing here. So I'm going to do a copy paste. All right, and this one should use modern, and this one should use just the original data. So maybe I should name that lazy. And this one up here should be lazy. Okay, so now I got two different functions. I got two Roman and two Roman modern. And now that I have that, I need to export my new function. Again, it's easy to forget it. I forget half the time, but understand if it doesn't work and you get some error message saying, hey, no idea what this is, then that'll be yours. All right, so two modern, let me call this two lazy, just
Your lazy array is missing data.
what's that?
The lazy array at the top.
Thank you. Good eyes, good eyes. All right, cool. So that looks good. All right, so now I have two functions. Lazy and modern, we could quickly update this and run both. But as I'm typing this, can someone tell me why what I just did is maybe not the best approach?
What if you decide that you need to make a change to that? Now you have to do two nearly identical functions to update.
Absolutely. James got it absolutely correct. We kind of duplicated code. So again, it's going to work. I can verify that once I copy these in. But the problem is we don't have the most elegant code in that, as James mentioned, if we need to like tweak our algorithm in one place, we're going to have to update the other function. And that's just not good use of our time, especially if we have a pretty small code base here. If we had like a project that had like tens of hundreds of thousands of lines of code, you're gonna have to go through an entire code base and update every particular part if you have duplicate code. So it's generally bad practice kind of have duplicate code in that sense. So if you look at two Roman lazy and two Roman modern, again, they're essentially doing the same exact thing. The only difference is what data or what conversion data we're using. So one way you could alleviate this is I'm going to create a new function. All right, it's going to be a third function. I'm going to call it two Roman and let's say num. Oops, I'll do a function there. And then I'm going to add another parameter. So this parameter is going to be, let's say, make it a Boolean, so lazy or modern. So usually when I'm naming Booleans, I name them with an or. So it kind of, again, I don't know how intuitive it may seem, but I'm kind of used to this practice. If I see a variable with an or in it, that's going to make me think, all right, this is a Boolean. It's going to be either the first part or the second part. So it's going to be Boolean value. And then this will be my function. And so I'm going to use that Boolean to determine what data set I need to use. So if you bear with me, I'm going to copy over my logic one more time. Put that into my two Roman and Roman value. All right, so this is the only thing I need to kind of change is based on lazy or modern is the data set. So I'm going to create a new variable here, call it let's data, or let's say conversion data. And I'm going to use a ternary operator. So I know I'm throwing a lot of, maybe not new things, but unfamiliar items perhaps, but I just want you guys to get comfortable with it. So a ternary operator is just an inline or it's like a quick if statement. So I'm going to investigate the value of lazy or modern. So in the true case, if lazy or modern is true, that means I'm trying to get lazy Roman numerals out of it, right? So the first value is the true value, the second value is the false value. That's just my naming convention. So if lazy or modern is true, that means lazy is what I'm going for. My conversion data will be the lazy data set. Otherwise, it'll be conversion data modern. Does that make sense to everyone? Everyone kind of familiar with ternary operators or kind of adjusting to them? So again, this is my if condition, and this is my if statement, sorry, if condition and if body. So if true, it's going to do this part, and then else case. So this colon kind of represents the else. It's going to do this part. All right, so ternary operators are very convenient. I would say use them, but don't abuse them. So if you have like a complicated if statement that has like a lot of logic in the body, probably don't nest that in a ternary operator. Also, if you have a lot of like if, else ifs, elses, sometimes ternary operators can get kind of messy and get hard to parse. So I'll just caution you on don't overuse them or abuse them. All right, so now that I have something that can control what data set I use, I just need to update my usage of that data. So I have 3 places. All right, so now that I have this one function that could do both items, you could do in the lazy case or modern, I can simply take my function here, delete all that logic, and call my to Roman with my number. And in this case, modern is the false case. I'm going to pass in the false. And then likewise, I'll copy that function call over here. And in this case, I want true. All right, so again, just to review that, I have a Boolean that I'm passing in. If it's true, I'm saying I want lazy as my go-to conversion. So that's going to get me the conversion data for lazy. And then if I pass in false, I should get the modern data set. Okay, so notice that my two functions are just one calling another function. Also notice that I do not need to export my to Roman function. So I go to the very bottom. Notice I'm still only exporting my to Roman lazy and to Roman modern, because this function is only being used internally. So my to lazy or to Roman lazy, to Roman modern are calling that function, but that's within this file. My Roman numeral spec does not need to know about that third function because it's not using it directly. All right, so if I've coded up everything correctly, if I didn't screw anything up here,
You still need to return the value from those lazy and modern.
great catch. Yes, that is something I definitely goofed up on. So yes, we need to return that value as we were doing before. So we were returning a value here, returning whatever we kind of formulated from our to Roman function. This return value is what's being passed back to whoever is calling that function. So we're calling to Roman. To Roman is going to give us a value back. If we did not have this return statement here, everything is going to work, as in we're not going to kind of get an error, but we're not going to get anything returned from this function, right? So this function is going to call another function. The to Roman function will give us back a value, but we're just going to ignore it in this case if we don't have a return statement. If we add a return statement here, now we could actually pass back the value that this function gives back to us. So whoever calls to Roman modern, which in this case is our spec file, can get a value back, returned back to it. All right, so let's verify that we didn't break anything here. So clear. Let's do a node Roman numerals spec. Okay, I see a whole list of trues, so that's going to be my sign as we didn't break anything. But yeah, so just keep that in mind when you're coding. Always avoid, if you can, duplicating code. So there's a principle that we talked about. I don't know if we introduced it yet. There's the DRY principle. DRY stands for don't repeat yourself. It's something that all coders should be wary of when they're writing code. So as best as possible, if you can kind of condense code and kind of reuse code, that's going to pay dividends, especially for large projects. Reusing code is kind of the mindset you should have. All right.
If you don't mind, Ankur, I do want to chime in though. I've gotten myself into trouble, and I've seen it recommended before where, oh, hey, I've written this bit of code, and now I want to tweak it to make it do two things. And it ended up saving me time to just go ahead and duplicate it, write the second function, and then combine them later, rather than try to just tweak one to make it work in multiple ways. Because you just get yourself into trouble where it ends up, you burn up a bunch of time because you broke it the first one anyways, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yep. Yeah, duplicate code, again, can get you in a lot of trouble. Again, if you have bugs, it's gonna be hard to fix. Yeah, all right, cool. So I think that completes everything I was hoping to do, and the added bonus of adding a third function in there. All right, so I did a git add and a git commit for my latest changes. Now I wanna wrap this up. So let's see, William Watson, what's my next step here? I did git add, git commit. How do I actually get my code pushed up to my GitHub?
You want to say git push origin?
So origin is the default name for that destination. You can have multiple destinations. So theoretically, I could have like 4 different repositories and kind of commit to any one of those that I want to. Origin is going to be your default one. So since we only have one repository that we're attached to, I need to fix this at some points. All right, cool. So we did git push origin, we get some information that I don't really care about at this point. So I'm going to go back to my GitHub. Refresh just to see that my changes got added. All right, 1 minute ago, that sounds right. Notice my Python files didn't change, so those timestamps are the same. I can go into the commit and see, okay, yep, this looks like what I did with my most recent commit. So I had conversion data, change that to conversion data lazy. And I have 3 commits. So my most recent commit was adding that third function. My second commit was doing the modern, where's that? Go back, 14 commits, there we go. So I had 3 commits. I had lazy Roman numerals, modern Roman numerals. Again, so it's kind of nice, again, to have this increment of commits. So if I want to see, okay, how do I implement modern Roman numerals? Like what changed between lazy and modern? I can just click on that rather than having one commit that has just one, all my changes. Okay, cool. One more step I think I need to do. Susan, how do I actually kind of get this so the instructors can see it on their end?
You need to go to the code platoon where it says Anchor. It should say code platoon.
Right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is my personal GitHub. I have my code committed to it. How do I kind of allow it to kind of be attached to my original destination?
I would, click on where you forked it from.
Okay.
The line below your personal account.
Okay.
And then click pull requests.
Okay. So I can see everyone else's pull requests. I see a lot of you guys have committed. But how do I get my solution here?
New pull request.
All right, new pull request. Yeah, so you're on the right track. So what you want to do actually is from your personal repository, you want to do pull requests from there. So I'm on my personal one, and then I want to go to pull requests. So this is going to say, take what I have and try to suggest adding it to the original destination. So I do new pull requests here. Take a look at my changes. Yep, all 3 commits. All this looks correct. I'd probably review it a little more in depth, but if that looks correct to me, I'm going to do create pull request, give it a title. So let's say Roman numerals part 1 and 2. All right, again, you don't really need to put a comment, but it is good to kind of put your name in here. So again, it makes it easier for us if you add your name. So let's say instructors. All right, so that should be, I do create pull requests. That should do things. All right, check. And then if I go to pull request now, I should see my solution here. And again, I see a lot of your guys' solution in here too. All right, cool. Any questions on Roman numerals or any of the Git processes that we did?
Yeah.
Yes, Anchor. On Roman numerals.js on line 46, where you have the function with the 2 arguments. Is there a way, like, let's say we didn't want to use 2 Roman modern and 2 Roman lazy. Could we set like a default value where it's like lazy or modern equals like true or something like that, or false? And then somebody could just use 2 Roman, put in the number, and then an optional, like, does that make, I don't know if that makes sense or not.
No, absolutely. I think I understand the suggestion here. Yeah, one option here. So I'm just going to make some changes here. I'm going to delete these functions and basically expose my 2 Roman to that outside world. So these functions no longer exist. I think this was the suggestion was, if not, definitely correct me. But now that I have one function, great. Now whoever is using my functions has to now be wary of what to use. So they could say true in this case. I think the additional suggestion was, let's have a default parameter. I'm not sure if we talked about default parameters in depth too much, but this is basically saying if whoever is calling your function does not specify a value for this parameter, default that parameter to this value. So we can do it that way too. So let's say lazy case, we don't need to provide it. And I'm going to try Tom's trick. I am not as savvy with VS Code as he is, but I think it was Command Shift D, was it? Nope, that was not it. All right, I'm just going to do it the long way. Yeah, so you can do this and it should work. I don't know if I should go about doing this, but Seth, I think you had your hand raised. Do you have a question?
So after you committed that, or after you requested, after you submitted the pull request,
yep,
and we go back and we commit more changes
yep,
to our code, we don't need to do more pull requests, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it just basically attaches your branch effectively, or your forked branch back to the main branch for like basically if we want to actually adopt your changes, we could just kind of take your changes in. So yeah, you don't need to keep submitting pull requests. It's going to kind of keep track of all the changes there.
So for an actual company, how do we notify then like our supervisor or our direct reports that like, hey, there's a new change, get on there and go pull it or go check it out?
That's a good question. I know GitHub probably has some notification features to kind of monitor that. I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
If you go to your pull request, if you want to like actually go to like wherever you're, click on that. On the right hand side, it says reviewers right there. If you click on the little like the wheel, the settings wheel, you can type in who you want to review it, and then it will notify them.
All right. Looks like Tom's gonna be reviewing my code. All right. Cool. Yeah, GitHub has a lot of features, so a lot to explore there. All right, so I think that accomplishes it. So this was, I think, the suggested change where now we just have 2 Roman. The caller now has to pass additional parameter in. Again, they might need to read documentation because this false doesn't really make it clear what it's actually doing. But that's where reading documentation will come into play, where I would document my function and the parameters that go into it. But yep, this way would work also. Cool. Any other questions out there? Okay, we are hitting 10 o'clock, so let me stop the recording here.